Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad you're listening today. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me and my guest. If this is your first time listening, I just want to say welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and I hope you keep coming back for more. Be sure to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have the kids-only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. And by the way, if you're listening today and you hear something and think, I really should share this with someone, or there's someone at my church or in my family that needs to hear this episode, would you share it with them? I think that would mean so much to that person to let them know that you're thinking about them and let more people know about the Collide Kids podcast, which I would appreciate. You know, it is still January, which means we're still thinking about New Year and new habits and getting into a good rhythm and routine with our families. And so I really wanted to talk with someone today about how do we make faith and discipleship and devotions and Bible study a regular part of our family's routine. And so I have invited my friend Derek Altom, who is the director of events and development at D6 Family Ministry. And that's what this ministry is all about, getting the families connected and having intentional faith conversations. Derek and his wife Jennifer have been married for over 17 years, and together they live in Tennessee with their 4 boys, Stephen, Larry, Josiah, and Silas, and 2 dogs. Derek enjoys watching his boys play sports, reading a good book, spending time at the lake with his family and friends, and watching Indianapolis Colts football and Indiana Hoosiers basketball. This was such an encouraging conversation, especially for parents. And so here is my conversation with my friend Derek Altom. Derek, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Let's go.
This is so fun. We met a year ago. My good friend Hannah introduced us, and I'm so excited to talk with you today. Would you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, Derek Altom. I get to be the director of events and development at D6 Family Ministry. We are like a Christian publishing company that does books and curriculum and resources for churches and homes. We also have a whole slate of conferences called the D6 Conference, a couple different locations around the United States and several across the world, really just taking the message of generational discipleship literally to the ends of the earth. And but more importantly, I'm a husband of 18 years to my wife, Jennifer. We met in college. She's an English teacher at a Christian academy here in Nashville, Tennessee, where we live. And together we have 4 boys,
Nice.
Christen. My house is loud and has lots of different aromas. And my grocery bill's massive.
Sure.
Like it's unbelievable. But I have an 18-year-old son named Stephen who's about to graduate high school in a few months. So we're walking that journey. And I have a 16-year-old son named Larry who just got his driver's license. And they're actually a totally different conversation. The Lord gave us the opportunity to foster parent them and adopt them several years ago when they were 4 and 6. Wow. I have 2 more sons that the Lord gave us biologically, an 11-year-old 5th grader named Josiah and an 8-year-old 2nd grader named Silas. And we have all kinds of fun all the time. I'm just so thankful for the ministry the Lord has given me as a dad and a husband and at D6.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love that you foster parent and you're able to just walk through their life. That's so cool. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about D6 for sure. But before we do that, because this is a podcast for kids, I always make my guests tell me a joke. So what have you got for us today?
So, you know, having 4 boys, I have to be dad joke.
Right. Oh, right? For sure.
And so you don't have to pity laugh at what I say. You can just be like, the price is right. Bum, bum, ba-dum. You know, that's fine with me too, you know. So what did the triangle say to the circle, Christen?
Ooh, I don't know.
You're pointless.
That's good. I like that.
My 11-year-old is at that stage in his life where he's like, Dad, we're in
You
public.
can't do that.
You can't say corny
That's
stuff
right.
like that.
I like
Anyway.
that. That's a good one. I like that joke.
But you're not pointless. Don't hear me say
I
that.
did.
You are
Right.
loved.
The circle, that was pointless.
That's right. The circle is pointless, not you, the listener, or you,
Thank
Kristen.
you. So let's start with how you got started working with D6. How did that start? What was it about D6 that made you want to become a part of that ministry?
Right out of undergrad, I was a youth pastor and a kids pastor, and did I don't know why they let me do this, but I was like a worship pastor for a little bit, and eventually became a lead pastor. And I'd always been a strong proponent of what D6 Family Ministry was all about in their curriculum and in their books and in their resources. I actually attended the first ever D6 conference in 2009 as a children's and youth pastor, and attended with my wife. We had no kids at the time, and the Lord just used some of those foundational talks from the very beginning of D6 just to kind of cement in her and I just kind of the trajectory we wanted our ministry to go, and the trajectory we kind of wanted our home to go and our family to go one day. And we just continued to attend the conference and be faithful church servants. I have always had a friendship with our CEO. His name is Ron Hunter. Kind of a mentor a little bit. Just he's awesome in leadership, and he's a visionary. And the Lord, Kristen, the Lord just works out details. I don't think we need to dismiss the little mundane things in life that we think are not important, that I think the Lord wants to use to shape us and to put our life on the trajectory he wants for us. And Ron and I, from time to time, would just have lunch, because I moved back to Nashville to work at our denominational college, just doing PR and fundraising. And one day he asked me to lunch. It was during the pandemic, of all things, kind of near the end of 2020. And we're having lunch. We're eating at a place called the Lost Cajun, just eating some jambalaya and stuff like that, here in Nashville, and some beignets. And we're talking, and he goes, well, I want to have a conversation with you that could change your life. And he was looking for a director of events and development, and we just started kind of down that path. And as we'll get into my story a little bit, I think the Lord in my life, I have seen the principles of D6 play out in my life as a kid. And so getting the opportunity to work at this organization and do for others what has happened in my life was just something very, very attractive.
That's awesome.
And I'm not only, someone who works here, like I've experienced the principles and the things that we champion.
What are those principles that you guys champion? Tell us a little bit about that.
D6 comes from Deuteronomy 6. Chapter 6, verses 4-9, and I won't read that for you. I'll give you the Derek translation, of the Bible. But it's the Hebrew Shema. It's their reciting, hey, God is number one, and me as an individual, I'm going to love the Lord my God with everything that I have, my heart, my mind, my soul, my strength, and I'm gonna hide His word in my heart, and I'm just gonna be sold out for Jesus for those little young ears that are listening to this podcast. Like I'm gonna just give them everything, and then as a result of that, I'm then gonna impress those principles. Specifically in the text, he's talking about the people in our homes. Right. I'm going to impress those, as we sit at home. I'm going to use our language as we ride in the car, as we walk along the road, as we lie down, and when we get up, because the goal is to pass our faith from one generation to the next. The Israelites got in a lot of trouble, Kristen, because they did not pass their faith from one generation to the next. And so D6 is very biblically based, and we're just trying to steward the gospel, the message of the gospel in our own lives, and pass that on to the next generation. Good. And it's the church and the home working together.
That's right. Really. I think a lot of people feel like the way they're going to get spiritual training, the way they're going to get growth and learn about the Bible is only at church. And that's just not true. There's so many more days of the week that we spend at home. So tell us a little bit about that partnership. What is it that families need to look for when they're choosing a church that they want to partner with? We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have a saying here at D6 that discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life. And you don't live life inside the doors of your church. Most of your life is lived outside the doors of your church. We also have a little fraction t-shirt that we have. And if I were really smart, I would have wore it for this interview, but it's cold here today. And it's 1/168. There are 168 hours in a week. And most of the time people are at church for 1 hour. And the tagline is, it's not enough. Mm-hmm. So regardless of the type of home, Christian, environment that you come from, an example a little bit about my story that will kind of highlight this. When I was 9, my mom and dad divorced. My dad was made some bad decisions. I won't go into all those things. And they divorced. And my mom loved Jesus. And from the time that we were babies, me, my brother, and my sister, we were in church. And we were in church with her, and we were in church with my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle for a season, went to our church, her family. And so I had a really good nucleus of people in my life that instilled a biblical worldview in me, that instilled scriptural foundation in me, that made sure that we were putting in the DNA of our everyday lives biblical principles. But then I'm going to church, and I'm having Sunday school teachers and life group leaders and youth ministry volunteers and pastors and deacons and trustees and all sorts of people who are investing in me because they viewed it their job to kind of come alongside my mom as a single parent, to kind of help instill those same things that she's doing at home in me. And so you kind of see that beautiful partnership of the church equipping the home to pass faith to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what it's all about. It's not the church doing it by itself, because that's a failing model. We have statistics on that if it's not being enforced at home, the statistics are awful about students who leave the church post-high school. But it's those students who are getting it at church. Actually, it's being reinforced at church, and they're getting it at home with a parent or another influential adult in their life. I have so many men in my life that filled the role of my dad when he became absent. Mm-hmm. That if it weren't for those men, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you today.
That's amazing. If we're our family, I feel like there's a lot of families out there that are in search of a great church. Maybe they were burned by another church, or maybe they moved to a new area, or they're just now deciding, I think we should go to church. I think we should be involved. So what are some tips? What would you tell them about what to look for in a great church?
First of all, I think you think about things, okay, if students who are in church and when they leave the church after high school, if we want them to stick, we call it stickability. I think you can find multiple resources. Christian Smith, Barna, Awana's done some research, things like that. You can find this research out there. It's like, what are those stickability factors? Okay, so if I think about these stickability factors, I'm looking for a church that's really going to champion these type of stickability factors. And those stickability factors would be deep Bible engagement. So if I'm looking for a church that's going to help partner with what I'm doing as a parent or what I need as a young person, are they deep in Bible engagement? Are they preaching sound biblical sermons? Are they giving us take-home things that we can do to go deeper in Scripture? You know, are they equipping mom and dad with biblical resources to help do that in the home when the kids are young and need some guidance and direction? So deep Bible engagement. Another would be, does this church, no matter what my age is, give me the opportunity to serve the body of Christ? That's very important. And it's even more important if they can serve alongside their parent or a nurturing, caring adult in their life. If you're a new family walking into a church, let's say my family walks into a church, and we look like an army, the 6 of us coming into a church. But like if the 6 of us are walking into a brand new church, there's nothing more kind of like fearful sometimes than being a first-time guest at a church. Like it can be, but if you open the doors of the church and you're greeted by, let's say, a mom or a dad and a kid, welcoming people to church? Come
Yeah.
on. That immediately helps the kids who are walking in the door, but it also is instilling something in that kid who's greeting, who's serving alongside mom and dad, that I have a part to play in the body of Christ. I'm not the church of tomorrow. I'm the church
That's
of
right.
right now. And getting the opportunity to go to soup kitchens or homeless shelters or mission trips and serve the body of Christ, that's another huge stickability factor. And I've referenced this already. Are there nurturing, caring adults in the church that are gonna invest in my kid? And I've alluded to that in my own story. I talked on the phone 2 days ago to a man who I was at a point in my life where I needed a nurturing, caring adult, and he just kind of like adopted me. And I went and ran errands with him. I went grocery shopping with him. I went visiting in the hospital with him. We even got the opportunity as we got older to like work together in full-time ministry. And like, I'm telling you, Kristen, if it wasn't for that influential adult in my life, along with my parents and my grandparents, like, so I know these are not like, how do you investigate some of this? You got to look for it. Like, are there people in this church who are passionate about the next generation and making sure that we don't fall into the Israelite trap, and that we're passing our faith and putting the church in good hands in the future, and putting the faith in the hearts of students for all eternity.
That's so good. I love those. And those are definitely things you're going to have to look for after attending a few times.
Correct. You can't go one time and be like, oh,
Right.
I don't
You're like
see
in
it.
the
Bye.
parking lot, like nothing out here. But that is good. And if you are already involved in a church and trying to figure out, is this what this church stands for, then maybe that's something you could help them implement. Or maybe you could start saying, hey, we need to start doing this. I see this as a need in my family, and reach out to those leaders and let them know that this is something you want to see changed.
Yeah, be that influential adult for somebody else. I tell my teenage boys this, Kristen. I'm like, do you know that like kids that are first, second, third grade, you as an 18-year-old, you're way cooler and more influential in their life than I am. So just take the time to talk to them and get involved in BBS and, serve alongside and help tote kids from one station to the next. They're going to listen to everything you say. And steward that responsibility well.
I used to be a kids worship leader, and I would tell my praise team members, who were all mostly middle school and high schoolers, like, listen, I can go out there in full costume and I can shout and implement my voice and do crazy things, and the kids will barely pay attention to me. You guys could walk on stage and in monotone say, hey, everybody, let's stand up and sing a song. And their eyes will be locked on you because they love teenagers that help out in kids ministry, and they look up to them so much. So I was like, no pressure, but you're a leader, even if you don't want to be. And so you've got to focus on that.
Yeah, they want to be you. Invest in them and allow them the opportunity to take your spot for somebody else.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's so good. So let's talk a little bit more about D6. What is it that you guys offer for families to go alongside them in that discipleship process?
Yeah, we have a lot of different things that I think I could help your families with. First of all, our bread and butter is called D6 Everyday Foundations Curriculum. Now, that's for a small group, that's for a church. But what's unique about D6 Everyday Foundation Curriculum is that we are very, very intentional about creating home pieces to take home. And so let me give you a little brief explanation of what our curriculum is like. The idea is that, and I'm going to say this with some nuance, like we want every age to be on the same page. So from preschool all the way through senior adult, everybody's studying the same thing. Now, the preschool is a little different, that it's more thematic just because of learning style and developmental things. But for the most part, we're putting everybody on the same page. So what I'm learning as a 41-year-old in my life group, so is my 8-year-old. And so is my 11-year-old and my 16-year-old and my 18-year-old. We're all learning the same thing. So then what that creates, Kristen, is an opportunity to think about Deuteronomy 6 when we get in the van and we drive along the road and we leave church and we go eat Mexican, because that's what you do after church is go eat Mexican. No. And instead of having 6 different conversations about what we learned in small group, we have one conversation from 6 different vantage points. And it comes with take-home pieces, like we have devotional study guides for every age that gets mom and dad and students and children in the Word of God every day, but it's kind of still centered around that same theme, those same passages, so that when we sit down at the dinner table or when we lie down or when we get up, we can have intentional faith conversations. So it's not just like learning this over here and my son's learning this over here and my son's learning this over here. It's we're all learning the same thing, and then we're having conversations about it and we're digging deeper on it. And it just creates an intentional faith conversation opportunity. That's kind of our bread and butter and what we do. So on top of that, though, we produce various books in the family ministry space that are for ministry leaders, but also for parents. And they can go to d6family.com and look at that sampling. I don't want to start rattling them off because then I'll have an author call me and be like, why didn't you mention my book? You know what I mean? So like, go get them all. Go get them all. d6family.com. We also, obviously, we've talked a little bit about, we have the D6 conference, which is a more of a philosophy conference, kind of like what we're having this conversation, where we don't cram our product down throats at the conference. It's more philosophy. This is what we think is biblical, and this is what you ought to be doing. So what does that look like? And on top of that, now this is a free thing that I think every single parent listening should download, is the D6 Family app in both the Google and the Apple Store. It's a completely free app. There is some pay things inside of there if you want it. But one of the coolest things in the app is we have a little section called Family Fun Questions. And it's literally, you hit a button and you're going down the road and it may ask you a fun, silly question or a serious question, and you talk about it in the van. And my kids, we've done that from time to time, and they love it because they're hearing some of mine and my wife's story. But then we're also just laughing together, because in my house, the first thing people do when they get in the car is put their earbuds in.
Yes.
And so we like to say, hey, before you put your AirPods in, we're going to do 3 family fun questions. That not only gets us an intentional faith talk, but it also lets them know, I'm not going to hold you hostage. You're going to be able to put your AirPods in at a certain point.
That's good. Yes.
And so the D6 Family app, if you'll search that in the Google Store or the Apple Store, you'll find that it's a completely free app. And there's lots of other resources and things like that in there for parents, just to have those intentional faith conversations at home.
And I think that's really the basis of it, right? It's just being able to talk about it as a family. Because I feel like a lot of times having a consistent family devotion time, that's not always possible. So like if my family can do it once a week, we're doing great, And
That's
so
exactly
just
right.
making faith talk a part of your daily conversations is really where it's at.
Yeah, one of our D6 speakers in years past, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say her name, or am I going to try to quote exactly like she quoted it. But you can hear it when you, if your listeners will subscribe to the D6 podcast. It's a weekly podcast, completely free. She essentially says we don't have to create those new opportunities to have those intentional faith conversations. We just need to invite God into what we're already doing. And so as we're sitting in the drive-through line at McDonald's, get our McMuffin in the morning for breakfast, because that's what godly people do, right? Or Chick-fil-A in the South, you just have those intentional faith conversations. It's just inviting God into our normal daily routines of what we're already doing, versus stressing over like, oh, where does this fit in the day?
Right, exactly. Finding a spot for it instead of just bringing God into what you're already doing. Yeah, I've had many moments like that. Even just last night at dinner, I had an experience in a store where someone came and tried to talk to me about what they believed. They had a different faith than what I did, and they were trying to talk to me about that. And so I shared that experience with my kids. Like, this is what happened to me, and how would you have responded if someone told you something like that? And what would you say? And so, just having those conversations based on your own experiences or your own Bible study. Like, you guys listen to this. I just learned about this in my Bible study. Isn't this amazing? And so I love when we get to do that. And it, like you said, we don't have to hold them hostage for a couple hours and everyone bow your head for a 2-hour prayer meeting. It's just,
you don't have to wait for like the Shekinah glory of the Lord to fill the room. And
that's right.
That very rarely happens.
That's right.
But the Lord is there all the time.
Exactly. And so if parents will share what they're learning about, you're going to be surprised how much your kids are going to start coming back to you with what they're learning without you even ask them. So that's something to look forward to when your kids get a little bit older. So I love that.
Yeah, be ready. They'll ask some crazy questions.
Yes. Most of the crazy questions my kids would ask when they were younger had to do like with really deep theological things right before bedtime, or right before, like they're just philosophers all of a sudden. You're like, this is not the time to talk about your eschatological views. We're going to just go to bed now. Well, this is so good. I love what you guys are doing. And I think it's so important that parents think about that partnership with the church. And then also for the church leaders that are listening, it's so important. Church leaders are partnering with parents, making sure you're not just doing separate things, but you're equipping those parents. That's your ministry just as much as those kids are.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not doing families any favors by doing it for them.
That's right.
We have whole generation of statistics that prove that model doesn't work. And so let's kind of, and I don't mean this like it sounds, but let's kind of get back to what the Bible actually teaches about generational discipleship. I think that's the model that works.
Absolutely. And I love something you said earlier too about how important it is to have those influential people in your kid's life, that parents are not the only people telling them about spiritual things and telling them about the Bible. You want other people to pour into them, like really great leaders and Sunday school teachers and pastors and coaches, all of those people. You want them to speak into the life of your kid so they're hearing it from all different directions.
And you will have to resist the urge to say, I've been telling you that for 6 months.
Right. Yes.
You have to resist. You could just celebrate within that the light bulb has gone on, even though you really want to like headbutt them.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I'm telling you.
You're like, wow, what a great concept you have just learned, even though I said it before.
Well, like going back to, you asked me about my path to join the D6 team.
Mm-hmm.
That was because I had an influential relationship with Ron, and he was pouring into my life. And and we were friends before we were colleagues, and Ron's a generation ahead of me, They just, those kind of things matter.
Absolutely. And I think you don't have to be a kid to have some influential people in your life. So if you're an adult and you feel like, I don't really know that I have anybody speaking into my life, you can find someone and just ask them, say, hey, could we go get coffee and talk about the Lord? And, it's really, it feels daunting, but it's really a good thing to have some people that could speak into your life about who God is and hold you accountable.
Yeah. If you live in Nashville, I love coffee. So you just reach out to me. We'll go do that. I'll fill my day doing that. Let's go.
Let's go. That's good. Well, Derek, this has been so awesome talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing about D6 and your story. I love that you shared that with us. Before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests to tell us a memory from when they were a kid. So what memory you want to share with us today?
I was thinking about this the other day because it's time to like clean up the leaves in my yard. Mm-hmm. Okay. And from the time I was like 8 or 9, maybe 10, my grandma would come pick me up on Saturday mornings and take me to wherever my grandpa was. Cause he had in his retirement years, he had like a little lawn business that we took care of maybe 20 yards for. And a lot of them were like elderly ladies in our church or people we knew. And so like me joining him and then just like cutting grass all day Saturday with him and riding in the truck with him, just an old beat up rusty truck that smelled awful. And but during those Saturdays, like we would stop and we would go have lunch together. One of our yards we mowed was a restaurant, and they would give us free food after we cut grass. Nice. And so we would eat lunch together. And I did this all through high school. Like that's what I did on Saturdays. And and as I got older, I think I appreciated it more and more and more. And I remember, Christen, when I felt this just call in my life that God wanted me to pursue ministry and ultimately leave our hometown. Mm-hmm. Nobody had really ever done that of our family, and just go pursue what the Lord wanted me to do. And my grandpa was not a man that, I think it's his generation that like really expressed his love and his appreciation. But you just knew it. Yeah. You could feel it. And I said, Grandpa, I got to tell you something. I feel the Lord calling me to move to Nashville and go to Bible college and start studying for the ministry. And, I said, that means I'm going to leave, and I probably never be back, to our hometown. And, I didn't expect him to respond, mm-hmm. Christen, and he goes, I think I've known that about you since you were a kid.
Wow.
And so that was a huge cement moment for what I felt like the Lord was calling me to do.
Yeah.
Because the man who was one of the most influential people in my life, he was the best man in my wedding 18 years ago. And at the time of this recording today, he would turn 93 if he was still alive.
Nice.
He beat cancer by going to heaven, and it was just a huge monumental thing in my life for him to say that to me.
That's awesome. I love that. What a beautiful story. Well, Derek, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners will definitely check out you guys' resources and all of the D6 stuff that's out there and get the app. I think that sounds like a great thing for a lot of families. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate it.
Yeah, blessings.
Wasn't that so good? I love talking about grandparents. I think that's so special. I love that Derek encouraged us to find a church. It's so important to have that church family and fellowship to partner with your family for that discipleship. He also said we need to try to be that influential person for someone else, whether that's another person that goes to our church or someone in your neighborhood or maybe someone in your family that you could influence them to move towards faith in God. He also said we don't need to create those new opportunities to have intentional faith conversations with our kids. We just need to invite God into what we're already doing. Like when you're waiting in the fast food drive-through line or during your bedtime routine, you can invite God into those moments. Well, if you'd like to learn more about D6 Family and their ministry and resources, head over to d6family.com and check that out. Well, now it's time for our kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend, Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma, and this is my verse, Joshua 1:9. Haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Thank you, Emma. That was such a good verse. Do not be discouraged or be afraid. Yeah, I think that I learned that verse in Awana, like when I was a kid, and it always makes me think of Awana whenever I hear that verse. So good. Thanks for sharing that, Emma. Hey, if you would like to be like Emma and share your favorite Bible verse or a joke or a song, you can head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab at the top that says Kids Only. You can record it right there. It's really easy. Or you can find information about how to send it to me through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod, and I would love for you to follow me there. If you'd like to support the podcast in other ways, you can do that by subscribing and following this podcast on whatever podcast app you're using, and leave a rating and a review. That really does help other people find out about the show. You can also check out the merch that we have. The links are in my social media and on my website. We've got shirts and mugs and really fun stickers, so check that out. And you can share this episode with friends and family and let them know why you like to listen. Well, I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I hope that you get some time to have those intentional faith conversations with your family. That is so important and so needed today. And in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between, and all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids Podcast.